just want to thank some more of our sponsors and also remind you to make sure you check out the sponsors that are upstairs. We have 2 levels of sponsors. So we have a room up there where there's a bunch of more great exhibits to check out. But I want to thank Hemp Ecosystems, Tony, who's going to be on this panel here, California Hemp Foundation, New Belgium Brewery, who donated Hemperor beers, which we'll all get to enjoy at happy hour today. We've got Tree Free Hemp, Americhanver, Cam with Americhanver upstairs. Got a really awesome exhibit. Definitely check it out. Eco Stucco. We have Lime Strong, Air Easy, the Hempcrete spray machine, Hemp Today, Canagrove. Lawrence Turbin with Canagrove is here, kind of a legend in the hemp industry. Hempwood, who could not be here today, but they have a hempwood production facility in Kentucky that they got a $5 million investment for, and they're making some really awesome products. And then lastly, Spectra Heat, a film-based heating solution. So I'm going to introduce this panel really quickly, or introduce our moderator, rather, and then I'm going to jump on the couch because I'm going to join the conversation. But Henry Valles, it's an honor and a pleasure to introduce our moderator, Henry. Henry's been a friend of mine for years. We actually met at a hemp building workshop in Asheville, North Carolina, right? And Henry is a bit of a connoisseur of hempcrete workshops. He probably could put a pin on every state in the country where workshops that he's attended. And last year around this time, we were actually in Belgium at the International Hemp Building Association Symposium, which Steve Allen has put on for 8 years, I believe. It's truly an inspiring event, definitely an organization worth looking at, the International Hemp Building Association. And with that, I'll let Henry take it away.
Beautiful. Thank you for the introduction, Maddie, and what an amazing turnout it's been, and incredible crowd here. Just going to start off, allow our panelists to introduce themselves and give a little bit of background, maybe how you got into hemp building and such. So we'll start off with Blake.
Hi, everybody. Blake Eagle. Excited to be here. We decided to build a house in Haley out of hempcrete quite a few years ago. Moved here to take a year off of work and go skiing, and this place is so amazing we stayed here. Raising a family, I have 2 little girls, and it's exciting to raise a couple of littles in a beautiful place. Hempcrete is exciting. It's one of those things that we wanted to build differently. My background is building. I've been in and out of quite a few different types of homes, a lot of standard practice. And, it's one of those things that when you start tearing those apart, they're just not built that well over time. Things fail quite a bit. So it's good to have some better opportunities and options out there. So that's why that was our drive to look into hempcrete.
Very nice. And you're one of the first here in the United States to do so.
Evidently, yeah. It was about 6 years ago now. So right as things were ramping up a bit, and there were some challenges.
And we'll talk about those too. And how about yourself, Tony?
So my name's Tony Laderach, and I was originated from Switzerland and grew up in South Africa. And about 2 years ago, my wife and I took a trip we went to Switzerland because actually she was pregnant and we wanted to have our child in Switzerland. And while I was there, before I got there, actually I met Tony Budden in Cape Town, South Africa, and he's one of the pioneers of the hemp movement today. And he told me about a company in Switzerland, Hemp Ecosystems, and this old guy, Jorgen Hempel, that's been working on this for like 25 years or something, and he's been, going at it. And so he sort of introduced me, made the initial contact, and I got to Switzerland, and I started working with Jorgen, with Hemp Ecosystems. And at the beginning of this year, we conceptualized the idea to basically develop a hemp mini house for the California market because of these like massive wildfire problems that were happening around California. And so we thought, let's bring a solution to the people, something that works. And so we got together with the designer, we designed the hemp mini house and landed in California. Pretty much with the objective of doing a bit of market research, evaluating the market, seeing if people even know about working with hemp. And so I came back because firstly I was here a few years ago, but anyway, that's another story. But I came back to a place that I knew in Northern California. And it just so happened that the owner of this cannabis farm where I was staying, he was very interested in building a house out of hemp. So he pretty much allowed us, or took on the idea of being one of the first to build this hemp mini house in Mendocino County. But he added a twist to it because of his sort of flamboyant design and stuff. He wanted it to be his own version. And I must just say, like, I'm really surprised that I'm even speaking on this panel right now. I was like a year ago, I could never have imagined this in my wildest dreams.
Let alone in the middle of Idaho.
Exactly. And I've only been in this game for about 2 years now, so I'm a newcomer myself, but I have a background in engineering and construction, so I know what we shouldn't be doing in the world of construction, and that's why I actually came into this, so that we could find a better way to do things for our future generations.
Absolutely.
And that's a bit of a background, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this panel, and I hope that I can share as much of this knowledge from the experts, so-called experts that we saw earlier back in Europe, and we're here for you guys, so
thank you.
Let us know.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
And Sergey, by yourself.
How you doing, guys? My name is Sergey. I'm from Ukraine. We built some hemp houses over there. I'm a civil engineer by trade. I finished my degree in Canada, and ever since graduation, I've been involved in the construction industry. And my interaction with hempcrete came in Australia, out of all the places in the world, in Tasmania. And I saw, how not to build, with hempcrete. And at that time I didn't know, and we almost ruined that house. It was a slurry that we were pouring into the formwork. It was all wet, and it was crazy. But never mind, it was a transitional moment for me in my life, and I could say freely. And I always say that, that hempcrete changed my life. And I left what I've been doing as a project manager on different construction projects across the world. I worked in Canada, in Turkey, and in Europe. And I just saw that we can build houses using natural materials. That's it. And that was a period for me because I never questioned the way we were building, the way we were fabricating materials, the way we were utilizing old materials, recycle them or not recycle. And maybe 4 years ago we started a company called Hempire in Ukraine. And ever since then, never looked back. Now we have an office in Los Angeles, California. So we're just happy to be part of U.S. game, and share our knowledge. We built quite a few houses in Europe, and we've done some projects in U.S. already. So, it's an incredible moment for this country, I have to say, and you will realize very soon why I'm saying this.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Mead.
Hey, I'm Matthew Mead, founder and CEO of Hempitecture. Thank you. Created Hempitecture out of my dorm room in college when I was studying architecture as an undergraduate, and I got to go to a liberal arts school in upstate New York. And the beauty of going to a liberal arts school is that you get to study a lot of things. So I was studying studio art, architecture, and environmental studies all at the same time. And my senior year in college, I kind of wanted to cross off, check a couple boxes for 2 of my course requirements at once, both architecture and environmental studies. So I thought, why don't I do a research project on natural building materials? And the reason that I wanted to do that research project was I learned about kind of a surprising statistic that the built environment in the United States is responsible for approximately 40% of our carbon footprint and 40% of our domestic energy consumption. And there is an organization that's still in effect today, Architecture 2030, that is working to reduce carbon in the built environment, both embodied carbon and the carbon emitted by the built environment. And their conclusion was kind of simple. It was, if buildings are responsible for the largest stake of energy consumption and carbon footprint, then buildings have to be the key to fighting climate change. And if we don't change the way that we design, build, and live, we're not even going to make a dent in our climate problems here in the United States and across the world. And so I presented this startup concept, and this was around 2012. Industrial hemp was not legal in about any state. My architecture professor said, "You must be out of your mind," and was met with a lot of resistance. So, as I mentioned, was in the Northeast, and maybe a little bit of a different perspective there than elsewhere in the United States, perhaps out west, where maybe a little bit more progressive and forward-thinking. But ultimately, started to get some traction in these business plan competitions that I was doing. I probably did about 5 business planning competitions, and I remember one of them was for $250,000. Every single one of these business planning competitions, I walked away a loser. And it was okay because it really inspired me to keep reaching for this, and it made me realize the mission of education that has to happen. These people don't understand the need for reinventing our built environment, so that's a reason to push even further. But after losing all these competitions, I did what any recent college graduate would do. I went to St. John in the Virgin Islands and was hanging out on the beach and working at an eco-resort there, kind of connecting my architecture experience to hands-on construction for the first time in my life. And it was really great. I was loving it. I actually remember the day I called my mom, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to live down here." She said, "No, you're not living in St. John, the Virgin Islands. No, it's not going to happen." And one day I got a phone call from a gentleman in Idaho who we're going to hear from on our second panel today. And he said, do you want to come out to Idaho and build one of these hempcrete buildings that you're talking about? And I kind of pulled the phone away from my face. I was like, "Is this a joke?" I have no idea where Idaho is, man, but I'm there. Let's do it. So that's the story of how I ended up in Idaho. It was supposed to be for 6 months, ended up being a year, and then time has gone on, and it's a beautiful place to live, and a place that I feel fortunate to live and get to share with everyone who's here. So thanks again for everyone for coming here today.
So I want to dive deep a little bit more into, I feel like your first project that you do is, you learn so much, the ups, the downs, just getting, more familiar with hempcrete. So, Tony, can you talk a little bit about your first project, what you learned from it, what challenges you faced, and what you have changed since or are considering to change since your first project?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge I had on my first project was trying to learn how to speak French.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it was in Switzerland. But I guess just sort of getting to working with the material itself. I mean, working with lime was one of the challenges, I think, just like having to wear that protection, covering yourself, covering your eyes, and making sure that you don't get that on your skin because it can burn. And then just learning how to sort of manage it when it does get on your skin. That was a challenge.
You're not a hemp builder without some lime burns, right?
Yeah, man, it's like the initiation stripes into the game, and you got to get your burn. And then another challenge is, I'd say, sort of communicating it to the market, communicating it to people that don't quite understand how natural materials can perform. Because when they hear about hempcrete, the first question is, is it like concrete with hemp in it? And so this has been a question which people have been asking us over and over. And so I guess we're changing the paradigm, because what we're calling it now is hemp lime. We're just telling it as it is, because hempcrete seems to be no offense to hempcrete. I mean, of course, we're here because of hempcrete, but we want part of this educational step is to change the paradigm, and so people can sort of get away from this misnomer of like, oh, this is concrete with hemp sprinkled in it. It's not concrete. It's not structural. It's an insulative material that has health benefits and that lasts for centuries.
Yep.
You know. So I guess that's the educational part of it has been a challenge, just to get people to understand what we're working with here. It's not something that's known by a large portion of the people in the construction sector. I mean, ask anyone in construction how to mix concrete or how to pour concrete, and they'll probably be able to tell you.
Yep.
So that's kind of what we're dealing with at the moment.
Very good. I know, Maddie, you've shared this story a couple times. You're out in the middle of Idaho Base Camp in your first project and had some quick realizations. Can you share that with everyone?
Yeah, it was pretty apparent early on this project at Idaho Base Camp is for a nonprofit organization. For everyone who's attending the field trip tomorrow, you'll get to see Idaho Base Camp. It's in a super beautiful yet super remote place. And so every piece and part of this building had to be brought over this mountain pass road. And I remember the first time I came out to Idaho and I saw this property, and my reaction was kind of like, how are we going to build anything out here? It's like in the middle of nowhere. But I was really fortunate in that, very early on, I came to Ketchum with sort of a network of support. Blake was one of the first people that I met when I came to Idaho. And Blake is truly a pioneer ahead of his time who, really did a hempcrete building project before people were talking about hempcrete. And it's amazing that, I landed here in Idaho to build a hempcrete building for someone else. And Blake had already successfully completed his building project just, 30, 40 minutes away. And so to step into kind of a team, Blake consulted with us on that project, worked with an architect who is forward-thinking and open to green, sustainable design. So while there were challenges, there was a lot of support. But just getting the materials to Idaho Base Camp was a challenge in itself. And also, as we'll find out, when we go up to Idaho Base Camp, it's a bit breezy up there, and it's a bit chilly. The views make up for it. But when you're at 7,000 feet above sea level, summertime is a lot shorter there than it is elsewhere. And when things are temperature sensitive, you really have to kind of plan out your design program. And as I mentioned, it was for a nonprofit organization, and Hempitecture actually fundraised on Kickstarter for almost $29,000 that we donated 100% to this project to help make it possible. So we had support from all over the world in that. However, it's hard to get all the money that you need to get a project together in the middle of nowhere and have it be on a sort of timeline. So I'll talk a little bit later about sort of some of the solutions that we came up for that. But
That's great. And Blake, how about yourself? I'm not really too familiar with the code enforcement laws here in Haley, correct?
Yeah, that was our main challenge, no ICC certification. We really learned that your building jurisdiction can drive a project. Yep. They can allow you to spend your money how they want you to. You know what I mean? Those were some of the main, it took us 9 months to get approval just to do this. We had to attend some seminars, try to dig up a report on other countries that have done this. And, you start looking at the UK reports, which we referenced, and one out of Canada, compiled a 200-page report of what this product is. Here's the British Board of Agreements certification and how they ran it, and tried to use that as reference towards the American version. And they put the brakes on, like, whoa, what is this? And their biggest thing was the second homeowner. When you talk to it like a real estate value, you're like, well, you guys can do whatever you want. Whether we allow this for you to do it is fine. It's the second owner, because the city said they still have liability in allowing a project like that in their jurisdiction. We were also faced with, at that time, an above code building program that the city of Haley had adopted, which the House met with flying colors, but there was really no way to prove that all these tests that were out there were real. And the fire safety thing came up with the fire chief. Those were some of our biggest breaks in the beginning. But with perseverance, and a like Maddie said, you have a support network of people that at that time was very limited, but we were able to call on people who were experienced and had some of this knowledge that had either brought it over from the UK or wherever, and just, pick their brain as, we all get from other people trying to gather information and how can we do this. So by, perseverance and saying, I'm designing a hemp house, we're building this, even though we almost gave up 3 times. There were a couple of moments where I just want to build a house. Why does it have to be this hard? But we, powered through and we're able to do it. And to this day, I am so
And live in
glad.
it.
We still live there. Yeah, we love the house so much. We've built it out of pocket. So in order to not have a huge construction loan, we only finance the amount needed to get a temporary C of O. And then we've been finishing it out of pocket since. Actually, like yesterday.
Nice.
Kind of finished it.
Congrats.
So
Perfect timing.
perfect timing. I couldn't have done it without family and my wife. We were pregnant at the time. Here's the low economy. Everybody's hurting for money. We're pregnant. And we're going to build a simp house. Let's do this. And
What could go wrong?
what could go wrong, right? It worked out though, and we love the house. I think that the performance side of things and the health of our family has improved just from, I don't know, I don't feel like we're as sick as our other friends that have children. We're all in the same pool and school environment. Yeah. And I feel like our health has improved. So.
And that's where I feel we lack in the States is really starting to get that data pool and have, the examples of the efficiency, the health benefits, things of that nature. Right. So we can more easily go to these code enforcements and city municipalities to be like, hey, this is the data, let's get this going.
And having there, just having the building official, actually we went through 3 building officials. We had the first one that took the full education. And of course, his first question was, can we smoke it? And we're just like, whoa, let's stop right there. And we're going to re-educate you on what this is. We're building a house. Yeah. So having to educate 3 building officials just to get to the end of the project was also time-consuming and challenging. And re-educating. Now it's a state-funded program. Idaho, as a building agency right now, is on board. When you talk to the local jurisdiction, every one of them that I've spoke with is happy to say, yeah, let's do that again. That's a great product. So, challenges, but perseverance, pays off, and
absolutely,
we got to keep moving forward.
Yep, that's why we're all here.
And if I could just add,
yeah.
Blake's house is a beautiful example of a hempcrete home, and on the field trip tomorrow, we're going to get to go see Blake's house. So thank you, Blake, for opening up your
Yes, sir. No shoes and booties on, right?
Please, no shoes.
And how about you, Sergey? How was your first experience?
Well, I could say about Ukrainian experience when we started off the company, and it was incredibly difficult to find the first client, of course, because there were no houses like this built prior in Ukraine, and 4 years ago we were in the middle of the military conflict with Russia on the eastern part of the country, and people were dying, and no one could care less that it's a carbon sequestering material, and that it's doing all this magical stuff, which it does, of course. And I convinced a friend of mine. I'm like, listen, this is going to be the best thing ever happened to you. He's like, okay, let's try. And then the project dragged on into like late November. And in Ukraine, it gets pretty cold sometimes in the winter. It's warmer than here, but still pretty chilly. And we finished, we got lucky. We finished maybe last week of November. And I don't know, in Fahrenheit. The frost came 2 weeks afterwards, minus 20 Celsius. Must be I don't know.
Cold.
Cold. And we're walking around the house with a client in February, and all the water froze. And he's walking mesmerized. Wow, this is amazing. It's so stone hard. And I realized just water froze inside the wall. And I'm like, let's wait until April. So And then we came back in April, and the house survived. And after that, I realized, wow, it's amazing. You know, we were finishing the house late in the fall, and that moisture did not destroy the structural property of the mix inside the wall, and I was mesmerized. As a civil engineer, for me, it was incredible. Many liters of water were there, and it survived. And then I realized, and then I started to push hempcrete to the limit on the next projects, going really late, mixing it in winter time, and it just wouldn't crack. You know, I was just, I was impressed.
Wow.
I was impressed, and it's incredible ability to sequester moisture and release it. I mean, this example is a definition of it, you know, without losing its structural stability. It's incredible. And after that, you know, the belief came that we can do, you know, all kinds of houses. After I survived that one, you know, I'm like, okay, we can build anything we want. And then we started with the dome houses. And then one of the clients, he said, I don't need this timber on the inside. I want render. Remove that formwork. And can you do it? And I'm like, standing, you know, I'm looking at the dome right now inside, staring at the ceiling. All this cladding was installed for the hempcrete to install from the top. And he's like, take it all off. And I just want to see render. I like render now. And I'm like, yeah, we can do it. And we did it. And that was the best thing we ever done, you know. And we realized, again, like structurally, how structurally sound this material really is, even though it's not load bearing. So through these real scary experiences, you know, I realized the possibilities of these materials, you know, and of course, like, you know, number one problem was mentality of people, architects, building departments that were our worst enemies, and changing people's idea about this material would be probably the hardest thing. And of course, yeah, mixing it in winter is probably the second hardest thing, you know.
Wow. Maddie, how about, and we'll go through everyone, but what do you see some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that we have here in the States for the hemp building industry?
It's a really great question because I think there's a number of both challenges and opportunities, but off the bat and kind of like the low-hanging fruit that really needs to be tackled in terms of a challenge is compliance. How do we get hempcrete or hemp lime to a place in the U.S. where it's not this repetitive conversation with every building inspector that you meet with? And as Blake said, there's always the stereotypical question first: can you smoke it? No, we're not talking about a house made from marijuana. We're talking about a building product that lends to healthier, more efficient, fireproof homes. All the qualities that a building inspector wants in a building project can be represented by hempcrete. We just have to cross this barrier of understanding. And so I think standardization, testing, and just having resources available. Steve Allen put together a really good best practices guide that's really helpful in sharing, you know, information to building inspectors. But I think we have to keep going forward with that. We have to compile research. We have to have this research done in the United States. So I see that as a big challenge. The other challenge is understanding how hempcrete fits into a project. Over the last 6 years, I've spoken to hundreds of people, and I've built probably 5 or 6 hempcrete houses. So for every few hundred people that I've talked to about building a hempcrete house, it didn't happen for one reason or another. And there's a number of reasons why, but I would say the number one reason is not understanding how hemp lime fits into a design build program. It has to be considered early on, and so that's a big challenge as well. So that kind of piggybacks off that education idea. It's not just about educating the building inspectors and officials, but also about educating the consumer. The opportunities are great. Going back to that point of talking about, you know, carbon in the built environment, embodied carbon. I'm really looking forward to Chris Magwood's talk today about using buildings as carbon storage. That's a radical concept, that buildings themselves can be turned into carbon sequestering storage devices for something that we need to figure out ways to remove from our atmosphere.
Absolutely.
So I'm really excited about the sustainable environmental opportunities that are associated with hempcrete and hemp lime being used more frequently here in the United States.
Absolutely. And Tony, I know you're just recently here in the States, but from a European perspective and seeing it from the US, I know that's a great perspective to have. So what are those challenges and opportunities?
It's pretty much the same thing in Europe with the building officials and all these kinds of compliances that we need to try and conform to and get through the regulations and jump through the hoops. And man, it's a long road. So I fully understand that. That's one of the main challenges here in the States as well. It's just to get these things standardized, man. Get people to know what we're dealing with. And then I think another challenge that I could just highlight at the moment is availability of materials, like just high quality and reliable materials that are compatible and that work, because you can't just use any type of hemp. It needs to be clean. Otherwise, you saw what happened earlier on those slides. I think you get failures. So just ensuring that we have the right materials at hand. That's logistically, that's a challenge, and I completely relate to you taking a hemp house building a hemp house up the hill. I don't know where it is, but that sounds challenging. And we took on a similar project this year in Hopland on a farm in the middle of nowhere, and it was logistically a challenge, and it really brought the cost of everything up. Landing it in Oakland is one thing, but getting it from Oakland to the farm is another thing. Storing materials. So we really need to start setting up this network, distributors and people that can distribute our materials and make sure that the materials are of the right standard. But then at the same time, that challenge is an opportunity, because that creates an opportunity for people who are interested to get out there and do that, because there's a place for everyone in this sector, man. These guys, some people want to sell and distribute materials. Well, there we go. There's an opportunity for you. So let's get on board and do this.
Absolutely. How about yourself, Blake? You've been building for quite a while.
When you run short on something, it's hard to go to the lumberyard and just pick up hempcrete.
Yeah.
Like you say, supply chain is going to be a big thing. Acceptance, readily available. You need to be able to go and run and grab a part to that building. Like whatever you choose to implement in the total project, it has to be available rather than shipping it here. We had some overseas issues. It just took a little longer. There was some mishap just in like you say, getting the material on site.
It's not hemp. It's not hemp when you ship it from overseas. Wood chips.
That's right. When you say, After we built the home, we got a call from the tax commission asking us, did we import, a bunch of weed across the border? And they were like, whoa, no, no, we did not. And they're like, oh, well, you have to pay a use tax on that then. And we still had to come up later with another $1,500 to pay a use tax just to utilize that material in our home. And those expenses have to come down. I think, I have a little bit out of the game as far as the communication on potential clients lately. But people who I have briefly spoken to about it, their number one concern is budget on building. You shouldn't outbuild your market value. Granted, a lot of people have the idea that I want to build this beautiful home and sustainable, I can recycle it, all the opportunities that are there. But when the expense of the product itself and all those finishes that come into play along that have to be utilized in the system, the cost just has to be associated. Otherwise, people's biggest turnoff is budget. Because they want to put nice furniture, or I want to put whatever else in there, nicer windows, whatever that thing might be. Why would I put money in my insulation?
Yeah.
Well,
and coming from a real estate perspective, that's the number one thing that people ask, right? Like, what's the value of the home going to be? And if I'm going to, put in 10, 15% more, into the construction costs, will I be able to get that money out, right? But those are the aspects that we need to promote, like healthier, more sustainable, much more energy efficiency. That is, you're getting that value out of it, but I think it's the lack of education that's there too. And we really have to educate everyone that's involved in that process, from the architects, mechanical engineers, to builders, trade organizations, to really have a good understanding on how we can make this more obtainable and what is the building method that can help reduce that cost, along with educating and training labor. Because I think there's a lot of builders out there, but when you want to take on mass projects, people are scared because the labor isn't trained to do so. So that's really where I think the industry can thrive, is start to get these training centers together and show them, hey, the compatibility, this is not just building, this is building science as well, and start to educate the industry in that regard also.
Absolutely. I went through a carpentry apprenticeship program. No touch on how, this is what we're going to build, this is how we build it, and this is the way it's going to be when we're done.
Yeah.
Here's the plans, build it like that.
Nothing how it works.
There was no building science in school at that part. That was all learned after the apprenticeship program, things that you study on your own just to become a better base of knowledge in the industry, especially as a builder for a client. When you're spending their money, they want to know that you're spending it well. And the availability again, and just...
Absolutely. And Sergey, some challenges and opportunities?
Well, after completing a couple of projects here in California, definitely the biggest challenge here is the mentality of people. Like, what is it with you guys in US and the OSB boards? Please, like, it's driving me nuts. It's just like no house gets built without drywall OSB. I'm like, how the hell your ancestors used to build 100 years ago when the OSB wasn't here? I mean, those houses, they still stand,
Yep.
And, like I've said, architects are our biggest enemies, but we should be our best friends, They should be our best friends. We can get really creative with hempcrete. You can do the dome house, you can do the round, you can do a pyramid, I don't know, whatever they want, So they cannot do that with the OSB. They have to pre-cut all these things, it's going to look ugly, So... diagonal bracing all the way. So it's definitely supply of materials, right? Definitely hemp should come locally. I mean, it should be a sustainable economy where you have hemp field, you have a local decortication facility, have local binder production. Now we see companies producing local binders. Now you guys are going to have a lot of biomass, local biomass. You're not going to be shipping stuff from Holland to New Zealand anymore, all that nonsense, Definitely educational component. Now that, we're on the educational committee, we have to start with children and students.
Absolutely.
Because those older guys, we're a waste of time, honestly. Try to prove an older guy that, who's been involved in the construction industry for 40 years that hempcrete doesn't need this and that. I've seen that in Ukraine and other countries. It's ridiculous. You cannot. It's like hitting a concrete wall, And so we have to start with children and creating a curriculum for universities, educating future architects and builders. Let them understand how lime works. We just had a conversation with Mario 5 minutes ago. It's all the natural traditional materials with which people were building for hundreds of years, if not thousands. Look at Roman Empire, all built with lime, still standing. Yep. So if you're on the building department, don't tell me that this thing is going to collapse in 5 years. I always tell them, go visit Rome, And
Good point.
And but then there is opportunity. It's a big farming monster. U.S. is great in that department, and I think we're going to see some magical stuff happen in this country in the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to turn upside down. We're going to see a lot of different educational facilities, coaches, training programs on the rise. We're going to see a lot of creative designs and the materials that you can create out of hemp, and hempcrete is just the beginning, trust me. So
beautiful. Well, we got a few minutes left, but I want each of you, we have, great crowd here, aspiring or people already involved in the industry. One piece of advice or encouragement for the people out here.
I would say think positively and keep the charge going. You have to have motivation behind your dreams. And if you don't follow those, then, you just move on, I guess. But, the biggest thing is accomplishment and, just keep up the challenges and move forward.
Absolutely. How about you, Tony?
Jeez, that's quite a question, eh? One piece of advice. It's like, wow. I'd say when you're designing your house, take care in the detail. With hemp, working with hemp, there are a few details that need to be paid attention to. Don't give up, be courageous, because this material is wonderful to work with, and it really gains strength in form. So yeah, be courageous and just go and experiment and get out there and get your hands dirty with it. Get out of the books and go and do it. And that's probably the best advice I can give. So.
Beautiful.
I can tell that everything you're going to hear today, you already heard about Hempcrete, it's true. We've seen, like Alex gave a beautiful presentation. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic material. Good point, Tony. Try to do it with your own hands, and your mind will change. You will realize how important it is to mix. And even if you start building your own house, it's double the pleasure. You'll see the result, and you're going to be fascinated by it. We had just quickly, we had a client recently. We just completed insulating his house, and he called me like 2 days ago when I was taking a flight to LA. He's like, Sergey, I feel like I'm inside a tank. I don't hear anything. I can think straight right now. So, go build yourself a Hempcrete house, live a long, healthy life, and that's my advice to you.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm not so sure this is advice specific to building your own Hempcrete house, but I guess my advice would be to we need to grow this thing, and my advice would be for everyone here to take this day with you, bring it back to your community, share it with a friend, share it with your family, tell them about what you learned, because a theme that's been echoed here is the need for education, and that is why we're having this event, to inspire, to encourage action, to motivate. And so my piece of advice would be to just take at least one thing you learned and bring it back with you, share it with someone else, because that piece of advice that you learn might change someone else's life and help change our built environment.
Absolutely. We have time for Q&A. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure, and continue to enjoy this amazing summit. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's give a round of applause for the panel. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Thanks, sir.
Cheers, matey.
Okay.